All right, so we are starting today with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, Book 8, Discourse 6. We're at the start of the Samudra Mantanam story, the story of the churning of the milk ocean, one of the most well-known ones. So we just barely started it last time with the sage's curse causing the Devas to lose their splendor and the Asuras to gain the upper hand. And they went to Brahma and together prayed to Sri Hari for help. Discourse 6 is the transportation of Mount Mandara. Sri Shuka resumed, thus extolled by the hosts of gods, the Almighty Lord Sri Hari appeared before them, O king, with the effulgence of 1,000 suns rising together. All the Devas had their eyes dazzled by that very effulgence, so that they could not perceive the sky, the quarters, the earth, and even themselves. How could they perceive the Lord? The glorious Creator, along with the destroyer of the universe, beheld that very spotless form, dark green as the emerald, with its eyes ruddy as the interior of a lotus. Clad in a shining silk piece, yellow as burning gold, it was graceful and charming in every limb, had a lovely countenance and beautiful eyebrows. It was adorned with a crown set with precious gems and a pair of armlets, one on each arm, and its cheeks, illumined by brilliant earrings, added to the charm of its lotus-like face. It was decked with a girdle, a pair of wristlets, a pearl necklace, and a pair of anklets, and was adorned with the famous Kaustubha gem and a wreath of sylvan flowers about its neck. It bore on its bosom goddess Lakshmi in the form of a golden streak, the Srivatsa mark, and was waited upon by his own weapons, Sudarshana and others, endowed with a personal form, so the weapons had assumed embodied form as people, as living beings. Accompanied by Lord Shiva and all the hosts of gods who fell prostrate with their limbs on the ground, Brahma, the foremost of the gods, hymned the Supreme Person. Brahma prayed, "Hail, hail to you, the ocean of unmixed bliss in the form of final moksha, of whom birth, continuance, and destruction have never been predicated, who transcends the gunas, who is subtler than the subtle, whose form cannot actually be measured, and whose glory is inconceivable. This form of yours, O Supreme Person, deserves to be worshipped by seekers of blessedness through methods laid down in the Vedas and the Tantras. O, in this form, which embraces the universe, O Maker, I clearly perceive all at once ourselves as well as the three worlds. In you, who are independent, existed this universe at the beginning. In you it continued in the middle, and in you it will get merged in the end. You are the beginning, the middle, and the end of this cosmos, even as clay is in relation to a jar. In other words, that clay is in the beginning, a jar is just clay. In the middle, while it is a jar, it is still just clay. And after it is broken, it's still just clay. Since you are higher than the highest. Having created this universe by your own Maya, depending on you, you have subsequently entered it. The wise, who are well versed in the scriptures and have controlled their mind, perceive you with their mind as unaffected by the gunas, even in the universe. Even as men obtain by proper means fire and a pair of wooden pieces from rubbing them together for friction, or using a fire drill for friction. Milk in cows, food grains and water in the soil, and livelihood through exertion. So do the wise realize you in the objects of the senses, by the purified intellect, through the various means of God realization, and then describe you in terms of their realization. Having seen you as such, the object sought for by us very long since, appearing in person before us today, O Lord, with a lotus sprung from your navel, we have all attained supreme bliss, similar to the one which elephants oppressed by a forest conflagration do on perceiving the water of the Ganga. Accomplish you as such the object for which we, the guardians of all the worlds, have duly sought the soles of your feet. O inner self, what is there to be made known outside by others to you, the all-witnessing Lord? in other words, like pointing out that there is no need for them to explain what they have prayed for and why they have invoked Srihari, because of course he already knows. Appearing as distinct from you, like the sparks of a fire from the fire itself, how can Lord Shiva, the protector of mountains, myself, the gods and other ethereal beings, Daksha and other Prajapatis, and whoever there may be, know our welfare, O Lord? Impart to us the count. And so, in other words, it is not our place to pray for you for something because you know better than us what would be good for us. So impart to us the counsel that may be beneficial to the Brahmanas and the gods, on whom depends the welfare of all others. Sri Shuka went on. Thus extolled by the Creator and others, and having fully known their heart just as it was, the Lord spoke in a voice deep as the rumbling of clouds to the gods who stood with joined palms and had fully controlled their senses to receive his command. Though capable of accomplishing the purposes of the gods all alone, Lord Vishnu, the supreme ruler of the gods, addressed them as follows, eager as he was to divert himself with the churning of the ocean of milk and other sports. The Lord said, Hello, Brahma. O Lord Shiva, the source of all blessings. O gods and other heavenly beings, Gandharvas and others, listen you all attentively to my words so that good may come to you. Go forth and let peace be concluded with your cousins, the sons of Danu and Diti, who are favored by time and tide of fortune, till prosperity returns to you of its own accord. In the event of the object to be accomplished being of great moment, enemies too must be won over through alliance. Once you have achieved your purpose, O Devas, you may certainly behave with your enemies, even as a serpent done with a rat. Efforts should be put forth without delay for producing the amritam, nectar, by drinking which even one who is in the jaws of death would become immortal. Casting into the ocean of milk all kinds of plants, grasses, creepers, and herbs, and making Mount Mandara a churn dasher, and Vasuki, the king of Nagas, as a cord for whirling it round. Churn the said ocean unweariedly, O Devas, with myself as your helper. The Daityas will only reap toil, while you shall enjoy the fruit. Approve you heartily of that which the Asuras want, O Devas. All one's objects are not accomplished well by anger as through kind words. You should not be afraid of the poison called Kalakuta that will come out of the ocean, nor should you ever evince covetousness or greed with respect to the objects that may be churned out of the ocean, nor give vent to anger if they are coveted or even taken by the Asuras. Sri Shuka continued, having thus duly instructed the Devas, the Almighty Lord Srihari, the Supreme Person, whose movements are guided by his own free will, vanished out of their sight, O Parikshit. Bowing to the Lord, the father of the Prajapatis, as well as Lord Shiva, the source of the universe, then returned, each to his own realm, while the Devas headed by Indra called on Bali. Raja Bali, the ruler of the Daityas, who was praiseworthy in every way, and knew when to wage war and when to come to terms, kept under restraint his own generals who got excited at the sight of the enemy, even though the latter were not prepared for action. The Devas approached the Bali, son of Virochana, who sat on his throne, guarded by leaders of Asura troops, and having conquered all the three worlds, was invested with the highest royal splendor. So just to connect this with the recent reading we did about Prahlada, Bali is his grandson, son of Virochana, who was son of Prahlada. Having conciliated Bali with his polished language, the highly talented Indra told him all that he had received instruction in from the Supreme Person. Presumably not actually all, but just the churning of the ocean plan. The proposal found favor with the Daitya Raja, as well as with whosoever were present there, Shambhara, Arishtanemi, and other Asura chiefs and denizens of Tripura. Having arrived at a mutual understanding, the Devas and the Asuras, who had now cultivated friendship, thereupon put forth their best energies for obtaining the Amritam, O chastiser of foes. Then uprooting Mount Mandara by their might, and roaring like lions, the arrogant Devas and Asuras, who were all full of energy and whose arms were strong as bludgeons, proceeded to take the mountain to the seashore. Exhausted by carrying their load to a long distance and unable to carry it further, Indra, the son of Virochana, and others helplessly dropped it on the way. While falling down, that mountain, which resembled Mount Sumeru, the mountain of gold, crushed under its huge weight numerous Devas and Asuras on that spot. Finding them disheartened and with their arms, thighs, and necks broken, the Lord appeared there on the back of the king of birds, Garuda. Perceiving the Devas and Asuras badly squeezed by the falling down of the mountain, he revived the Devas by his mere look, as though they were quite unhurt. Placing the mountain on the back of Garuda with one hand by way of sport, and mounting the bird himself, he flew to the seashore, surrounded by the Devas and Asuras. Taking down the mountain from his shoulder and placing it on the seaside, the celebrated Garuda possessed of beautiful wings. The foremost of winged creatures withdrew when discharged by Srihari so as to make room for Vasuki, the king of the Nagas, who was too much afraid of Garuda, his mortal enemy, to arrive while Garuda was still present. Radha's making a good point in the comments. Yes, it is the perfect timing for this story right before Diwali, since this story is leads right into some of the main Diwali stories. Thus ends the sixth discourse, entitled The Transportation of Mount Mandara, comprised in the story of the Samudra Manthanam, and Book 8 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 7. The Devas and Asuras proceed to churn the ocean of milk, and Lord Shiva drinks the poison appearing out of it. Sri Shuka resumed, summoning Vasuki the Nagaraja by assuring him of his due share in the rewards in the form of Amritam, and twining him round that mountain as a cord for whirling it round. The Devas and the Asuras, full of joy, commenced churning the ocean of milk for the sake of nectar, fully prepared, O scion of Kuru. Srihari, first of all, grasped the serpent in the forepart, near the head, and the Devas too took that end of the serpent. The Daitya generals did not like this act of the Supreme Person, and they protested, surely we who are enriched with the study of the Vedas and other scriptures and renowned for our birth and deeds are not going to hold the tail, the inauspicious limb of a serpent. Perceiving the Daitya standing quiet after uttering these words and leaving the forepart of the serpent, with a smile, the Supreme Person, along with the Devas, caught hold of the tail. So they agreed to trade and give the Asuras the position of honor. With their position thus defined, the sons of the sage Kashyapa, who are both the Devas and the Asuras, began to churn the ocean for the sake of nectar, exerting their utmost. On the ocean being churned, the aforesaid mountain Mandara, which had nothing to support it, sank into the ocean due to its weight, even though it was held by the mighty Devas and Asuras, O scion of Pandu. Their effort having been frustrated by a much more powerful destiny, they felt much dejected at heart, and their faces too grew pale. Perceiving the hand of Vignesha, since Vignesha, who is Ganesha or Ganapati, being the lord of obstacles, so perceiving the hand of Vignesha is a way of saying perceiving that an obstacle had arisen in their undertaking, and assuming the wonderful and gigantic form of a turtle, the Lord of unlimited prowess and unfailing resolve then plunged into the water of the ocean and bore up the mountain. On seeing the great mountain rising, the Devas and the Asuras girded their loins once more to proceed with the churning. Like another great division of the globe, the Lord in the form of the turtle bore the mountain on his back, which was 1 lakh yojanas, or 800,000 miles in extent. Supporting on his back, O dear Parikshit, the mountain, shaken by the might of arms of the principal Devas and Asuras, and consequently set revolving this way and then that, like a churning rod, the infinite Lord manifested as the first turtle, the Adikurma, regarded its revolution as the mere scratching of his back. Stimulating the strength and energy of the Asuras, the all-pervading Lord entered the Asuras in his Asuric aspect, his Rajasika nature. and animating the hosts of Devas, he entered the divinities in his godly aspect of Sattvika character. Again, he entered Vasuki, the Nagaraja, in the form of suspended consciousness, so as to deaden him to the pain that he would otherwise have felt as a result of his being pulled and rubbed with such force against the rugged surface of the mountain. This is also the form of suspended consciousness is associated with the Nagas in the sense of the pranayama and the mastering of the Sushumna channel, which is associated with Nagas. Pressing Mount Mandara, the chief of mountains, with one hand in order to prevent the mountain from springing up or falling off his back, on the back of his Kurma form, the Lord who was endowed with 1,000 arms, so not Kurma avatar, but another simultaneous manifestation, stood on the summit of the mountain like another huge mountain, under a shower of flowers, by gods headed by Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Indra, the Lord of Paradise, singing his praises in heaven. So evidently they are not taking part in the churning process. Strengthened by the Supreme, as pressing the mountain from above in his 1,000-armed form and supporting it below in the form of the huge turtle, and entering the body of the Devas and the Asuras in the form of his Sattvika and Rajasika natures, the mountain in the form of its stubbornness, and the Naga in the form of the suspended consciousness. And intoxicated with pride, the Devas and the Asuras began to churn the ocean with the help of the great mountain with such violence as to cause a great stir among the hosts of makaras and other aquatic creatures living in the ocean. With their brightness marred by the breath, fire, and smoke issuing from the 1,000 fearful eyes and mouths of Vasuki the Nagaraja, the Asuras, since they took the head end of the serpent, headed by the Paulomas and Kalayas, Bali and Ilwala, looked like a row of sarala trees scorched by a forest fire. On the Devas, however, whose splendor had been obscured by his flaming breaths and whose raiment, excellent wreaths of flowers, coats, and faces had been soiled with smoke clouds, under the direct command of the Lord, poured down copious showers and breezes moistened by the waves of the ocean fanned them. When Amratam still did not appear from the ocean of milk, being churned in the aforesaid manner by the commanders of the heavenly and Asura forces, Lord Ajita himself took up the churning. Holding the serpent Vasuki with his 4 triumphant arms, vouchsafing protection to the world, and agitating the ocean with the churn dasher in the form of Mount Mandara, the Lord, who was dark like a cloud, had a cloth of golden hue wrapped about his loins, was adorned with a garland of sylvan flowers and a pair of earrings that flashed like lightning, wore glossy and waving locks of hair on his head, and was possessed of reddish eyes, and who, in the form of the divine turtle, bore Mount Mandara on his back, now shone like a rival mountain. From the ocean, which was teeming with timis. Timis are whales. I've always found it kind of humorous that the Sanskrit word for whale is timi. It sounds like it's something tiny instead of the largest thing in the ocean. But timi does mean whale. Sea elephants, sharks, and even whales big enough to devour even timi, so a larger type of whales, and which, when it was being churned, disturbed the fishes and agitated the makaras, snakes, and sea turtles. There issued a most deadly poison called halahala. Seeing that effervescent, unbearable, and irresistible poison, possessing tremendous force and spreading in all quarters, as well as above and below, so it was rising like a gas. And finding no protection, living beings along with their leaders got frightened and flew for protection to Lord Sadashiva, the ever auspicious, O dear one. Beholding the aforesaid chief of the gods, dwelling on Mount Kailasa with his divine spouse for the welfare of the 3 worlds and practicing austerities so dear to ascetics, in order to set an example for their emancipation, they greeted him with hymns. The lords of created beings, the Prajapatis, prayed to Sadashiva. O Deva di Deva, O God of gods, O supreme deity, the protector, nay, the very self of all created beings, Save us that have sought refuge in you from this poison which is burning the three worlds. You are the one Lord competent to enthrall and liberate the whole world. Such as you are, the wise worship you, the Guru of the universe, capable of relieving the agony of those who have sought refuge in you. When you undertake through your own energy, consisting of the three gunas, the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of this universe, O self-seeing Lord, you assume the title of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, O perfect one. You are the supreme, mysterious, absolute Brahman, the creator of all beings, the Devas, beasts, and so on, high and low. It is you, the supreme spirit, that stand manifested as the universe by virtue of your manifold energies, and are its ruler. You are the source of the Veda, the cause of the universe in the form of the Mahatattva, or the principle of cosmic intelligence, the cosmic ego, characterized by the gunas, that bring forth the 11 indriyas, the vital pranas, and the subtle elements, the intrinsic nature of everything, the time spirit, and kratu, the creative will, as well as dharma, consisting of satya and rita. The wise declare that that which is known as the indestructible, consisting of the three gunas, is depending on you. Fire, which represents all the gods, is your mouth. The wise conceive the earth to be your lotus-like feet, O source of the universe. Time to be your movement, while you are conceived of as representing all the gods in your person. The quarters as your ears, and Varuna Deva, the ruler of the waters, as your palate. The sky as your navel, the air your respiration, the sun your eyes, and the water is your generative fluid. Your ego is the support of all the jivas, high and low, from Brahma down to the minutest creature. The moon embodies your mind, and heaven your head, O Lord. The oceans represent your abdomen, the mountains your framework of bones, all the annual plants and creepers the hair on your body. The 7 Vedic Chandahas, Gayatri, Trishtub, Anushtub, Brihati, Pankti, Jagati, and Ushnik, no other than the 7 constituents, the child, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and generative fluid of your body. And the entire range of dharma, as enjoined by the Vedas, your heart, O Lord, with the body constituted of the 3 Vedas, Rik, Yajus, and Sama. The 5 sacred Vedic texts known by the names of Tatpurusha, Aghora, Sadyojata, Vamadeva, and Ishana, O Lord, from the 38 parts of which the 38 fragmentary mantras came into existence, constitute your 5 faces, bearing the same names as those aforementioned sacred texts, the 5 faces of Sadashiva. Again, that self-effulgent principle, constituting the supreme reality, which is known by the name of Shiva, O deity, is your absolute state. Your shadow is seen in waves of unrighteousness, greed manifested in the form of hypocrisy, and so on, by which destruction is wrought, while sattva, rajas, and tamas constitute your 3 eyes. The eternal Veda, mainly consisting of metrical compositions, O Lord, represents a glance from you, the all-wise originator of the sacred lore. The absolute Brahman, which is not accessible to the guardians of all the spheres, nay, not even to Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, and Indra, the ruler of the Devas, or protector of mountains, in which rajas and tamas and sattva find no place, in which has all differences cast away from it, is nothing but your supreme effulgence. The act of your destroying many an enemy of living beings, such as the Kamadeva, the sacrificial performance undertaken by Daksha, the Tripura, the 3 flying cities built by Mayasura, the god of death, and the poison Halahala, is no matter for praise on your part, who remain so deeply absorbed in meditation that you do not even perceive this universe, created by yourself, as having been reduced to ashes by the sparks and flames of fire shot by your own 3rd eye at the time of the pralaya. They, on the other hand, that revile you as living in the company excessively fond of goddess Uma, your divine spouse, even though your feet are contemplated upon in the heart by teachers reveling in their self, and as fierce and violent and particularly fond of the cremation ground, even though you stand thoroughly disciplined by austerities, have surely not understood your leelas, and have cast shame to the winds, as otherwise they would not have the impudence to speak disrespectfully of Shiva in this way. Even Brahma and others are not capable of correctly comprehending your essential nature, much less extolling you properly, you the perfect one, who are so mysterious and higher even than the Prakriti, which lies beyond both causes and effects. How can therefore we, who have been created by Marichi and others, feel equal to it? Yet we have tried to extol you according to our barest capacity. We clearly perceive this visible form of yours alone, and not your transcendent reality, O Supreme Lord. As a matter of fact, your manifestation is intended to gladden the world, even though your activities are not always open to the world's knowledge. Sri Shuka went on, perceiving the aforesaid distress of theirs and sore stricken with mercy, the Lord, who is the friend of all living beings, told Sati, his beloved consort, as follows. Sri Shiva observed, "Oh, how distressing it is! Observe, or Bhavani, this calamity that has come upon these creatures from the poison called Kalakutta." So Kalakutta and Halahala are two different words for the same poison. Produced by the churning of the ocean of milk. Security must be vouchsafed by me to these people, anxious to preserve their life. For to protect the afflicted, this much is the concern of a great one who is endowed with power. The virtuous protect other living beings by sacrificing their own transient life, if need be. Sri Hari, the soul of the universe, O good lady, is pleased with a man who shows mercy to created beings that are bewildered by the deluding potency of the Supreme Spirit and have contracted enmity with one another. When Lord Sri Hari is pleased, I feel gratified, along with the whole mobile and immobile creation. Therefore, I hereby swallow this poison. May a happy and prosperous life be assured to all created beings through me. Sri Shuka continued, having thus sought leave of Bhavani, Lord Shiva, the delighter of the universe, proceeded to swallow that poison. And Sati, who was aware of his greatness, heartily gave her consent. Then, squeezing into the cavity of his palm the hala hala, which was spreading all round, Lord Shiva, the supreme deity, the protector of all living beings, swallowed it out of compassion. The poison, which was the concentrated impurity of the oceanic water, showed its power even on his person, and that it made him blue at the throat, although the spot became a special ornament to that benevolent soul. Generally, noble souls are afflicted at the agony of the world. For that, sharing the affliction of others constitutes the highest worship of the Supreme Person, the soul of the universe. Observing that benevolent act of Lord Shiva, the source of blessedness, the God of gods, Deva, who showers blessings on his devotees, the created beings who had approached him, as well as Daksha's daughter, Brahma and Lord Vishnu too applauded it. Scorpions, snakes, and poisonous herbs, as well as what other biting creatures, dogs, jackals, and so on there were, took in what little of the poison leaked from the palm of Lord Shiva even while he drank it. Thus ends the 7th discourse, forming part of the story of the churning of the ocean for the Amritam, in Book 8 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 8, the manifestation of the Lord's enchanting potency. Sri Shuka resumed, on the poison having been drunk by Lord Shiva, who bears the emblem of the bull, the aforesaid Devas and Asuras, full of joy, churned the ocean of milk with redoubled vigor, and from the said act of churning came forth the cow of plenty, the storehouse of milk, ghee, and so on, the principal substances fit for being offered as oblation into the sacred fire. This is Kamadhenu, the divine cow. Seers who were exponents of the Vedas and engaged in sacrificial performances took that cow, the source of milk, etc., fit for being poured as oblations into the sacred fire, for obtaining sacred material, ghee, milk, and so on, to be used in sacrificial performances capable of taking the yajamana to the path of the gods, leading to Brahma Loka, and so on to the final moksha, O king. Next sprang forth the celebrated horse, Uchaisrava by name, which was white as the moon. Bali longed for it and took it, and not Indra, because of the admonition given by the Lord, who had told Indra to let Bali and the Asuras take what they wished. Then issued forth the moon-white king of elephants, Airavata by name, which by its 4 tusks, resembling the 4 peaks of a mountain, obscured the splendor of Kailasa, of Lord Shiva. Next rose from the ocean of milk a jewel of the ruby type, bearing the name of Kaustubha. Sri Hari himself longed for that gem as an adornment for his breast. Then appeared the tree known by the name of Parijata, the ornament of the celestial world, which incessantly gratifies petitioners with the objects sought for, even as you, Parikshit, do on earth. Then came forth the Apsaras, adorned with gold necklaces and clad in excellent robes, who delight the denizens of heaven with their charming gait and playful glances. Then again appeared Goddess Rama, or Lakshmi, who is affluence personified and is devoted to the Lord, and who illumined the quarters with her splendor like a streak of lightning flashing against the crystalline mountain range called Sudama. All, including Asuras, Devas, and humans, conceived a longing for her. Their mind overpowered through astonishment by the glory of her comeliness, nobility, age or youth, and her fair complexion. The great Indra, the Lord of Paradise, brought for her a most wonderful throne, while the principal rivers, Ganga and so on, in their personal forms, the river deities, brought her sacred water for her ablutions in jars of gold. Mother Earth gave her all kinds of herbs required for her ablutions. The cows yielded to her their 5 sacred products, milk, curds, ghee, excrement, and urine. And spring, the Deva of spring, the spring season, yielded her the produce of the 2 vernal months in the shape of flowers and fruits appropriate to that season. Rishis laid down the procedure of her ablutions according to the scriptural ordinance. Gandharvas sang auspicious songs, and their wives, the Apsaras, danced and sang. Spirits presiding over clouds sounded with great force clay tom-toms, tabors, drums, double drums, and clarionets that produced a tumultuous fanfare, as well as conches, flutes, and lutes. Then the elephants guarding the 4 quarters bathed the goddess Sri, who held a lotus in one of her hands and was an embodiment of virtue, with gold jars full of water to the accompaniment of hymns chanted by Brahmanas. The god presiding over the ocean offered her 2 pieces of yellow silk, one for being wrapped round her loins and lower body and the other around her upper limbs. Varuna, the god of water, gave her a garland called Vaijayanti, accompanied by black bees drunk with the honey of its flowers. Vishvakarma Prajapati offered her wonderful ornaments. Sarasvati, the goddess presiding over speech and learning, gifted her a necklace of pearls. Brahma, the birthless creator, gifted her a lotus, and the Nagas gifted her a pair of earrings. Holding in one of her hands a wreath of lotuses with a swarm of black bees humming about it, and wearing a most charming face with a bashful smile playing upon it, and brilliant earrings hanging against her lovely cheek, the goddess Sri, who had already taken her abode permanently in the auspicious bosom of Sri Hari, moved about. Having a pair of symmetrical and closely set breasts painted with sandal paste and saffron, and marked with an exceedingly slender waist and moving hither and thither in that distinguished assemblage, accompanied by the sweet jingling of anklets, she shone like a mobile creeper of gold. Looking out among the Gandharvas, Yakshas, Asuras, Siddhas, Charanas, Devas of heaven, and others for a husband for her, a husband free from blemish, eternal, and possessed of everlasting virtues, she did not find any. And she thought to herself, there is no full control of anger in him, of whom asceticism can be surely predicated. Wisdom is found in some individuals, but is not free from attachment. A third one is great, no doubt, but there is no complete mastery of concupiscence in him. And how can he be a lord who depends for his existence and power on another? There is righteousness in some, but there is no love for living beings in them. There is liberality in some of these individuals, but in their case it is not conducive to liberation, their liberality being actuated by some interested motives, and thus they are going to remain in this world. Similarly, there is prowess in a certain individual, but it is not immune from the ravages of time. And surely he who is entirely free from attachment to the objects of senses cannot be a fit companion. inasmuch as he will choose to remain absorbed in abstract meditation and will have nothing to do with me. There is long life in some, but there is no amiability nor auspiciousness of the kind coveted by women. In some others, there is amiability and auspiciousness too, but their duration of life cannot be easily known. In some rare individual, both these qualities, longevity as well as amiability, exist, but he too is inauspicious in outward conduct. Of course, there is one who is very auspicious too, besides being long-lived and amiable, but he does not long for me. Having thus deliberated, the goddess Rama chose for her husband Lord Vishnu, the bestower of liberation, the most worthy of all from the point of view of his everlasting virtues, such as righteousness and wisdom, and absolute independence, who is beyond the three gunas and was coveted by her, who is wooed by all excellences, even though he does not feel interested in anyone. Placing on his shoulders the charming wreath of fresh lotuses, resonant with the humming of swarms of maddening black bees, and having attained to his bosom her own permanent abode, through her lotus-like eyes blooming with a bashful smile, she stood by his side. Lord Vishnu, the father of the three worlds, made his bosom the permanent abode of goddess Sri, the mother of the three worlds and the source of all riches. Ensconced there, Lakshmi promoted the welfare of her creation, the three worlds and their rulers, by her benignant look. A great noise issued forth from conchas, clarionets, and clay tom-toms and other musical instruments, as well as from Gandharvas, attendants of the Devas, and their wives, the Apsaras, singing on that occasion. All the creators of the world, headed by Brahma, Rudra, and the sage Angira, celebrated the Lord by means of sacred texts purporting to describe him and representing the bare truth, and showered flowers on him. Looked at by Sri, the gods and other created beings, including the lords of creation, became rich in amiability and other qualities, and attained supreme felicity. The Daityas and Danavas, on the other hand, became dispirited, rapacious, effortless, and devoid of shame, O Parikshit, when they were overlooked by Lakshmi. Then appeared the goddess presiding over the wine, the goddess Varuni, in the form of a maiden with lotus-like eyes. The aforesaid Asuras caught hold of her, of course, with the approval of Sri Hari. Next arose from the ocean, even as it was being churned by Devas and Asuras, both the sons of the sage Kashyapa, seeking Amratam, O Maharaja, a most wonderful personage with long and plump arms, a conch-shaped neck and reddish eyes, dark brown of hue, youthful in age, wearing a wreath of flowers and adorned with a pair of very bright earrings made of gems, wore glossy and curly hair tips on his head, was charming of every limb and possessed of the gait of a lion. He carried in his hands a jar full of amratam, full of the nectar, and was decked with a pair of bracelets. Indeed, he had emanated from a minute ray of Lord Vishnu himself. He was known by the name of Dhanvantari. It was he who revealed to the world the science of medicine, the Ayurveda, and he enjoys a share in the sacrificial offerings. Perceiving him as well as the jar brimful with amratam, all the Asuras who were eager to secure everything quickly snatched away the precious jar. On the aforesaid jar containing the amratam being carried away by the Asuras, the Devas felt dejected at heart and resorted for protection to Sri Hari. Noticing their helplessness, as aforesaid, the Lord, who grants the wishes of his servants, said, "Do not feel depressed. I shall accomplish your purpose by stirring up feud among them, as well as through my own deluding potency." A quarrel arose in their ranks, inter O Raja, their mind being seized with a thirst for the nectar. "I shall have it first, I shall have it first, not you, not you." This is what they said to one another. The Devas, who have equally contributed to this consummation through their exertion, deserve their share in this prize as much as in the merit resulting from a sacrificial performance undertaken by a community for common weal. Such is the eternal law. In these words, indeed, did the weaker Daityas, in whom jealousy was aroused by the selfishness of the usurpers, repeatedly protest against the stronger ones that had taken possession of the jar, O Parikshit. So quite a few of the Daityas were actually arguing that they rightfully should share the nectar with the Devas. But some of the stronger Daityas were greedily trying to break their pact. In the meantime, Lord Vishnu, who knows all expedients, assumed the most amazing form of a damsel who could not be described in words. It was worth looking at intently, blue as an Utpala lotus, and comely of every limb. Its well-matched ears were decked with ornaments. Its face was marked with lovely cheeks and a prominent nose. It had a waist slender, as it were, due to the weight of breasts fully developed as a mark of budding youth. Its eyes looked frightened by the humming of black bees, attracted by the fragrance of its mouth. It bore on its head of hair a wreath of full-blown mallikas, a species of jasmine. Its neck was embellished with a necklace, and the form was further graced with a pair of armlets worn round its shapely arms. It looked exceptionally charming due to its girdle that added to the beauty of its broad hips, covered by a loincloth which was spotless white, and a pair of anklets adorned its feet that walked in a winsome manner. Again, it incessantly kindled passion in the breast of the Daitya generals by its bashful smiles, dancing brows, and amorous glances. And thus ends the 8th discourse, entitled The Manifestation of the Lord's Enchanting Potency, in Book 8 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 9, appearing in the form of Mohini, the Lord deals out nectar among the gods. Sri Shuka resumed, having taken leave of all amity and adopted the ways of robbers, and snatching the jar of amritam from it, abusing one another, the Asuras caught sight of the approaching damsel. Running up to her with the words, marvelous beauty, amazing splendor, charming as her youthful age, they questioned her, passion having been kindled in their hearts. Tell us, who are you with eyes resembling the petals of a lotus? Where do you hail from? Already churning our hearts, as it were, what do you intend doing further? And whose daughter are you, O lovely one? It is not that we do not know you, as untouched before by immortals and daityas, by siddhas, gandharvas, and charanas, not even by the guardians of the spheres, much less by human beings. Have you been sent here by the merciful Creator, O pretty one, in order to afford delight to the senses and mind of all embodied souls? Certainly it is so. Such as you are, pray bring peace of mind to us, who are contending for a common object, and have consequently contracted enmity with one another, even though we are kin. O proud lady with a slender waist. Being sons of the sage Kashyapa, we are all brothers, and have exerted our strength for the common good. Pray divide the prize equitably, so that there may be no more quarrel among us. Thus urged by the Daityas, Lord Srihari, who had assumed a feminine form through his Maya, beautifully laughed and spoke as follows, looking at them through the lovely corners of his eyes. The Lord observed, how, O sons of Kashyapa, have you reposed trust in me, a wanton woman? Indeed, a wise man would never put faith in lustful women. The wise declare the ties of friendship of wolves and wanton women who are looking out for newer and newer delights, O enemies of the Devas, as inconstant. Sri Shuka went on, the Asuras, whose mind felt reassured by these jocular expressions of hers, since she's kind of teasing them, laughed a significant laugh, which was too deep for the common man to comprehend, and entrusted the jar of nectar to her. Having taken possession of the jar of nectar, Lord Srihari then said in a voice brightened with a gentle smile, if you accept whatever is done by me, whether right or wrong in any wise, I am prepared to divide this nectar among you. Hearing this utterance of that divine maiden, the leaders of the Asuras, who had no idea of her greatness, agreed to her condition, saying, be it so. Then, having fasted and finished their bath, propitiated the fire through sacrificial offerings, and bestowed gifts on cows and the Brahmanas, as well as on other living beings, they had auspicious rites, such as the recitation of benedictory prayers performed for their success by Brahmanas. Putting on a set of clothes altogether new, according to their pleasure, and graced with ornaments in every limb, they all squatted on blades of kusha grass that had their ends pointing to the east. When the Devas, as well as the Daityas, had taken their seat, with their faces turned towards the east, in a hall scented with fragrant fumes and adorned with wreaths of flowers and lights, that beautiful damsel, slow of gait due to her bulky hips that were covered over with a charming piece of linen, with eyes swimming as if under intoxication and breasts resembling a pair of vases, forthwith made her way into that chamber, jar in her hands, and warbling, as it were, to the jingling of her gold anklets, O ruler of men. Looking intently at her, who was no other than the supreme deity, and a counterpart of the goddess Sri in terms of her being beauty personified, who was adorned with a pair of gold earrings and had charming ears, nose, cheeks, and mouth, and from over whose breasts the end of the strip of cloth covering them had slightly slipped, thus partially exposing them. The Devas and Asuras felt completely enchanted particularly by her glances accompanied with a smile. Thinking it unwise to offer amratam to the Asuras as milk to serpents, both of whom are ferocious by nature, Lord Achyuta did not give a share of it to them, providing separate rows of seats for the two races, or the two clans of cousins, the Devas and the Asuras. Lord Vishnu, the ruler of the universe, seated them in those rows, each race in the midst of their own people. Beguiling the Daityas by his winning attentions, polite words, and movements beside them with the jar held in his hands, he gave the Deva, sitting at a distance, to drink the nectar that prevents old age and death. Respecting the promise made by them that they would accept whatever might be done by the girl, O Raja, the Asuras, who had bestowed their love on her, kept quiet also because they abhorred the idea of wrangling with a woman. Cherishing the utmost affection for her and afraid of losing it, and restrained by excessive regard shown to them by her, they uttered nothing unpalatable. Disguised in the garb of Devas and entering the row of Devas, Svarbhanu drank the Amritam and was pointed out by the moon god and the sun god, between whom he had surreptitiously placed himself. Sri Hari lopped off his head by his Sudarshana chakra, which was sharp-edged as a razor, even while he was drinking the Amritam, with the result that not the trunk which had been touched, that the not trunk which had been touched by nectar dropped down dead. The head of the Asura, however, which was raised to the position of immortal by coming in touch with the Amritam. Brahma, the birthless creator, made a deity presiding over a graha, which actually assails the sun god and the moon god on the new moon and the full moon, respectively, cherishing enmity towards them. When the nectar was well nigh consumed by the gods, this is, of course, the creation of how Svarbhanu was cut in half and became Rahu and Ketu. When the nectar was well nigh consumed by the Devas, Lord Srihari, the protector of the universe, assumed his original form once more, while the Asura generals looked on. In this way, the hosts of Devas and Asuras differed in their result, even though they worked at the same place and time with the same means and material, and though the nature of their activity and intention were the same. Of the two parties, the Devas easily obtained the reward in the shape of Amritam, due to their resorting to the dust of his lotus feet, but not the Daityas, who did not resort to that dust. Whatever is done by men with their life, wealth, organs of action, mind, and speech with reference to their body, progeny, and others having an eye to their distinctive character is futile. That, however, which is done by those very same means with an eye to their identity of divine nature becomes fruitful, and it redounds to the benefit of all, even as the watering of the roots of a tree tends to the nourishment of all its limbs. Thus ends the ninth discourse, comprised in the story of the Samudra Manthanam, in Book 8 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 10, Outbreak of Hostilities between the Devas and the Asuras. Sri Shuka resumed, in this way, the Danavas and the Daityas could not obtain Amritam, O ruler of men, even though they stood united and had been intent on doing the work, because they had turned their back on Lord Vasudeva. Having caused Amritam to be obtained, O Raja, and made his devotees, the Devas, drink of it, the Lord mounted on the back of Garuda, the king of birds, and departed, while all living beings stood gazing. Observing the highest good fortune and success of their enemies and jealous of it, the sons of Diti marched against the Devas with uplifted weapons. Reinvigorated by the Amritam drunk by them, and having taken shelter in the feet of Lord Narayana, all the Devas thereupon offered a united resistance with their weapons. There on the seashore raged a most dreadful, thrilling, and hand-to-hand fight, known by the name of a conflict between the Devas and the Asuras, O Raja. With a mind full of rage, the aforesaid enemies met at close quarters on that battlefield, and struck one another with swords, arrows, and various other weapons. Tremendous was the flourish of conches and clarionets, and the noise of clay tom-toms, taboras, and damaris, as well as of the trumpeting elephants, neighing horses, rattling chariots, and roaring foot soldiers. In that battle, car warriors closed with car warriors, infantrymen with infantrymen, horses with horses, and elephants with elephants. Some warriors fought on the back of camels, some on elephants, and others on donkeys. Still others fought on the back of Gauramragas, which are some sort of white or golden beasts. Bears, panthers, and lions. Others fought on the back of vultures, buzzards, herons, hawks, and bhasas. On the back of timingalas, so riding on whales, fighting in the ocean of milk. Sharabhas, bisons, rhinoceroses, bulls, gayals, and arunas. Some fought on the back of jackals, rats, chameleons, hares, and on the back of men. Others on goats, black antelopes, and swans, and still others mounted on boars. Some again fought on the back of birds of land and water, and others on animals with deformed bodies. The warriors of both the armies, O king, penetrated farther and farther in their effort to worst their opponents. With the ranks of warriors distinguished by their ensigns of various colors, spotless white costly umbrellas with handles of diamond, fly flappers of peacock feathers, and the bushy tail of chamaris, which are a species of deer found in the Himalayan region, turbans and pieces of cloth used as upper garment waved by the wind, brilliant coats of mail and ornaments, and burnished weapons shining brightly under the rays of the sun, O Raja. The armies of the celestial and Asura heroes shone like two oceans with rows of sea monsters. In that battle, the celebrated Bali, son of Virochana, was the commander-in-chief of the Asura forces. Seated in his famous vehicle, Vaihayasa by name, the foremost of all aerial vimanas, which had been manufactured by Mayasura and could fly at will, which was equipped with all implements of warfare and full of all wonders, O Lord, which was incomprehensible by reason and could not be precisely located because of its uncertain and wonderfully swift movements, and which, though perceived now and then, defied perception because of its dazzling splendor. And surrounded by all troop commanders, he showed in the midst of a pair of chowries, which were being waved on his right and left, and under an exquisite umbrella like the moon on the eastern hill. On all his sides appeared, in their respective aerial vimanas, other Asuras, the commanders of the various squadrons, Namochi, Shambara, Barna, Viprachitti, Ayomukha, which means the steel-mouthed, Dvimurdha, who has two heads, Kalanabha and Praheti, Heti, Ilvala, Shakoni, Bhuta Santapa, which literally just means the torment of created beings, Vajradamstra, who is possessed of adamantine teeth, Virochana, the bright shiner, Hayagriva, not to be confused with Vishnu's Hayagriva avatar. There's an Asura chief of the same name. Shankoshira, the spear-headed, Kapila, the tawny, again, not to be confused with Kapila avatar. Meghadundhubi, Taraka, Chakradrak, who has wheel-like eyes, Shumbha, Nishumbha, Jambha, Utkala, Arishta, Arishtanemi, Maya, the lord of the Tripura, and others, the Paulomas and Kalayas, the Nivata Kavachas, and so on. These are various sub-tribes of Asuras, the Paulomas, Kalayas, and Nivata Kavachas. Having not received any share in the Amritam, they had only suffered hardship in toiling. All these had on many an occasion utterly defeated the immortals at the very commencement of the operations. Sending forth the roars of a lion, they blew loud-sounding conches. Seeing his foes puffed up with pride, Indra, the destroyer of Balasura, got highly enraged. Mounted on Airavata, the elephant guarding the eastern quarter, with the temple juice streaming from its temples, Indra shone like the ruler of the day, appearing on the eastern hill with cascades falling down its sloping sides. All around him stood the other Devas, mounted on their diverse mounts and carrying different ensigns and weapons, as well as the guardians of the worlds, Vayu, Agni, Varuna, and others, with their retinue, rushing violently towards and reproaching one another with words that cut to the quick. Challenging one another and rushing forward, they fought in pairs. Bali contended with Indra. Guha, that says Kartikeya, cast his lot with Taraka, so fought the Tarakasura. Varuna fought with Heti, and Mitra with Praheti, or Parikshit. Similarly, Yamadeva tried his strength with Kalanabha. Vishvakarma, the architect of heaven, fought with Maya, the architect of the Asuras. Shambara fought with Tvashta. So we were listing Deva and then Asura, but here it's switched. Shambara is an Asura, fighting with Prajapati Tvashta as a Deva. And Virochana, Bali's father, the son of Prahlada, fought with Sapita. Namuchi, Asura, crossed arms with Aparajita. The Ashvins, the twin-born physicians of the Devas, together fought against Vrashaparvasura, and the god Surya fought with the 100 sons of Bali, of whom the eldest was Bana. Soma, the moon deva, likewise fought with Rahu. Anila, the wind god, fought with Pulomasura, and the powerful goddess Bhadrakali fought with Nishumbha and Shumbha. Vrashakapi, who is Lord Shiva himself, for his part closed with Jambha. Vibhavasu, who is the god of fire, fought with Mahisha and Ilvalasura, accompanied by Vatapi, with the sage Marichi and others, the sons of Brahma, O chastiser of foes. Durmarsha had an encounter with Kamadeva, Utkala with the Matrikas, the divine mothers, the Saptamatrika goddesses. The sage Brahaspati fought with Ushana, so the two gurus fought each other, and Shanaishchara fought with Narakasura. The 49 Maruts, the 49 wind gods, entered into a conflict with the Nivata Kavachas. The 8 Vasus fought with the Kalayas. The Vishvadevas fought the Paulomas, and the 11 Rudras fought the Krodhavasha serpents. Fighting in pairs as well as collectively on the battlefield in the aforesaid manner and approaching one another, the Asuras as well as the leaders of the Devas violently struck one another with sharp arrows, swords, and iron clubs in their eagerness to win. And they lopped off the heads of one another with bhushundis, chakras, maces, lances, and sharp-edged spears, darts, and firebrands, prasas, which are a barbed missile, and axes, scimitars, and bhallas, bludgeons, as well as with mudgaras and bhindipalas. These are all various types of weaponry. Elephants and horses, as well as those riding on them, car warriors and footmen, and various other mounts with their riders were cut to pieces. They had their arms, thighs, necks, and feet chopped off, while their ensigns, bows, coats of mail, and ornaments were torn in pieces. From the battleground, pounded by their tread and the impact of their wheels, rose at that time a thick cloud of dust enveloping the quarters as well as the heavens, including the sun. It, however, disappeared due to the ground having been drenched by the sprouts of blood. Thickly strewn with heads from which diadem and earrings had been knocked off, but had anger in their eyes and whose lips were still closely clasped in anger, as well as with stout and long arms, decked with ornaments and holding weapons, and with shapely thighs resembling the trunks of elephants. The said battleground looked attractive with the beauty of the fallen warriors. Headless trunks sprang on their feet on that battlefield and rushed again towards the hostile warriors with their stout arms still holding uplifted weapons and perceiving them with the eyes in their fallen heads. This referring to particularly to the Devas who had drunk the Amrita, who would not die even if their head was cut off. Bali assailed the mighty Indra with 10 arrows, Airavata his elephant with 3, the 4 guards of Airavata with 4, and its driver with 1. Quick in showing his valor, Shakra, another name of Indra, cut the arrows with the same number of 18 sharp bhallas, as though smiling as they came flying towards him even before they reached him. Observing his superb feat, Bali, who could not easily tolerate this discomfiture, took up a dart glowing like a mighty firebrand. Indra cut it while it was yet in Bali's hand, before he was even able to discharge it. Bali thereupon took up a spear, then a prasa, and then a tomara and double-edged swords. But whatever weapon he took in his hand, the powerful Indra cut down all of them. Going out of sight, Bali Sura next let loose his demoniacal Maya, and thereupon came into view a mountain over the heads of the celestial forces, O Raja. From that mountain fell down trees burning with forest fire and rocks with their tops sharp as the edge of a chisel, pulverizing the enemy's forces. Further from that mountain rushed forth large serpents and other snakes and scorpions, as well as lions, tigers, and boars, crushing gigantic elephants. There also appeared in hundreds nude ogresses with pikes in their hands, exclaiming, "Cut down, break asunder, and ogres too, O Lord." Then large thundering clouds, buffeted by winds, rained live coals with a deep and terrific roar. Conjured up by Bali, a very extensive and most formidable fire, helped by the winds, began to burn the celestial army, like the fire appearing at the time of the final dissolution of the universe. Then was observed on all sides an ocean that transgressed all limits and looked terrible on account of whirlpools and waves tossed up by fierce winds. In the midst of illusions that were being likewise created by other Daityas too, who were great adepts in conjuring tricks and were formidable because of their imperceptible movements. The celestial warriors grew despondent. When Indra and others, a protector of men, did not know how to counteract this evil, the Almighty Lord, who is the protector of the universe and was called to mind by the Devas, manifested himself there. Presently there appeared the Lord, clad in yellow robes and endowed with 8 arms wielding different weapons, with eyes resembling a pair of budding lotuses, and his feet, tender as young leaves, placed across the shoulders of Garuda with beautiful wings, and on whose person shone forth the goddess Sri, the Kaustuba gem, a priceless crown, and a pair of valuable earrings. The moment he entered the battlefield, the illusions created by the conjuring tricks of the Asuras yielded to the glory of that mighty Lord, even as a dream is broken the moment wakefulness returns. For, to say nothing of the Lord's actual presence, the very thought of Sri Hari is the radical cure for all ills. Perceiving Lord Vishnu, the rider of Garuda, on the field of battle and revolving his dart, the Asura Kalanemi, who rode on a lion, presently flung it at him, flung his revolving dart. Seizing it by way of sport as it was about to descend on Garuda's head, Vishnu, the Lord of the 3 worlds, dispatched with it, O protector of the people, dispatched with it the enemy Kalanemi, along with his mount, so threw his dart back at him and killed him. And this very Asura, Kalanemi, took rebirth as Kansa in Krishna's Leela. Encountering the Lord, by whose Sudarshana Chakra the mighty Mali and Sumali too had their heads lopped off and fell on the battlefield, Malyavan, another general of the Asurika forces, was just going to strike Garuda, the king of birds, with a pointed mace, when Sri Hari, the most ancient person, severed the head of this roaring enemy with the same chakra. Thus ends the 10th discourse, forming part of the story of the war between the Devas and the Asuras in Book 8 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And I think it would work to do one more because it concludes this battle and largely wraps up the story. Discourse 11, conclusion of the conflict between the Devas and the Asuras. Sri Shuka resumed, having regained their presence of mind by the supreme grace of Lord Vishnu, the supreme person, the Devas, headed by their ruler Indra, and Samirana, the wind god, now struck hard each one of those Asuras by whom they had been jointly assailed before. When the glorious Indra, the chastiser of Pakasura, full of anger, took up his thunderbolt in order to strike Bali, the son of Virochana, his subjects cried, "Alas, alas!" Reproaching the heroic Bali, who was well equipped with arms and was ranging fearlessly before Indra in that great conflict. Indra, who wielded a thunderbolt in his hand, addressed him as follows. Conquering fools whose eyes have been enchanted, a conjurer takes away their money. Though no better than such a conjurer, O fool, you seek to overpower us, lords of Maya, by means of incantations. Those foolish robbers who seek to ascend to heaven may rise even beyond heaven to still higher regions by means of spells I cast still lower down than their former abode. As such, I shall lop off your head today with my thunderbolt having 100 joints, even though I know you are an adept in the use of malevolent spells. Exert yourself with all your kinsfolk, O dull-witted one. Bali replied, Fame, triumph, discomfiture, and death fall in succession to the lot of all who are engaged in hostilities and whose actions are impelled by a propitious or unpropitious time or destiny. Therefore, wise men view all this, fame, etc., as determined by time, then neither exult nor grieve over it. You are, however, ignorant of this truth. We, for our part, do not take to the heart your words that sting one to the quick, since you deserve to be pitied by pious souls, and that you account your own self instrumental in bringing fame, and so on. Sri Shuka went on. Having thus twitted the powerful god Indra, the valiant Bali, the vanquisher of heroes in battle, struck him again with arrows pulled right up to the ear, him who had already been stung with taunts. Thus reproached by the enemy, who spoke the truth all the same, the god Indra could not bear his insulting speech any more than an elephant pricked with a goad. Indra, the vanquisher of foes, hurled his unfailing thunderbolt against him, so that, like a mountain that had its wings clipped, Bali fell to the ground, car and all. Finding his friend Bali fallen in battle, Jambhasura, a great friend and well-wisher of Bali, assailed Indra, thus rendering good offices even to his fallen friend. Riding on a lion, Jambha, who was possessed of great might, approached Indra and lifting his mace, struck him with great impetuosity on the collarbone, as well as his elephant, Airavata. Tormented by the stroke of the mace and utterly confounded, the elephant touched the ground with its knees, so was driven to its knees by the mace strike, and fell into a deep swoon. Thereupon was brought by Matali, Indra's charioteer, a chariot drawn by 1,000 horses, and leaving the elephant, who had been knocked unconscious, the mighty god Indra mounted the chariot. Admiring that prompt action of the charioteer, and smiling too, Jambha, that foremost among the Danavas, struck the latter with a burning dart in battle. So struck Matali, Indra's charioteer. Taking recourse to fortitude, Matali bore the pain caused by the dart, which was most difficult to endure. And greatly enraged by this, Indra severed Jambha's head by means of his thunderbolt. Hearing from the lips of the sage Narada about Jambha having been slain by Indra, his kinsmen, Namochi, Bala, and Baka, arrived there in great haste, since Narada is being a bard and is flying over the battlefield singing about all the heroic feats that are going on. Stinging Indra to the quick with their pungent words, they struck him repeatedly with arrows, even as clouds would assail a mountain with torrents. The swift-handed Bala simultaneously struck in battle all the 1,000 horses of Haryashva. Haryashva is another name of Indra, with as many arrows, with 1,000 arrows. With 100 arrows each, Pakasura struck separately Matali the charioteer and the chariot itself with all its parts by fitting to the bow and discharging all the arrows at one and the same time. That was indeed a great marvel in that battle. Perceiving Indra with 15 large arrows furnished with hilts of gold, Namuchisura roared on the field of battle like a cloud charged with water. The Asuras covered Shakra, including his chariot and charioteer on all sides with a network of arrows, even as clouds would obscure the sun and the rains. Not perceiving him on the battlefield and extremely perturbed, the celestial troops with their retinue, who were now left without a leader and were utterly vanquished by the enemy, uttered a plaintive cry like merchants whose ship has been wrecked in mid-ocean. Presently Indra, who is capable of overpowering the mighty, issued out of the cage of arrows along with the horses, chariot, flag, and charioteer. Illuminating the quarter's sky and earth with his splendor, he shone like the sun at the close of night. Observing his army overpowered by the enemies in battle, the god Indra, wielder of the thunderbolt, lifted his thunderbolt in anger with intent to slay his enemy. With the same 8-edged weapon, his 8-edged thunderbolt, he severed the heads of both Balasura and Pakasura, inspiring terror in the heart of their kinsfolk who stood looking on, O Parikshit. Perceiving their death, Namuchi was filled with grief, indignation, and rage, and in his eagerness to kill Indra, O ruler of men, he put forth his best energy. Taking up a lance of steel, furnished with bells and adorned with gold ornaments, he darted full of rage, threatening with the words, "You are slain," and flung it at the ruler of the Devas, roaring like a lion. Hari, here not meaning Sri Hari, but Hari is also a name of Indra, cut it with his arrows into 1,000 pieces, even as it flew towards him through the air with great speed. Full of anger, the ruler of the Devas then struck Namochi with his thunderbolt in the neck, aiming to chop off the latter's head. The powerful thunderbolt, which was hurled with great force by the king of the Devas, did not, as a matter of fact, even pierce the skin of Namochi. This was most wonderful, but the weapon which smashed the mighty Vritra was baffled by the skin on Namochi's neck. Indra now got afraid of that enemy of Namochi from whom the thunderbolt had been repelled. He said to himself, through a conspiracy of fate, what has happened that has bewildered the world? By means of this very thunderbolt in the old days, I clipped the wings of mountains that flew with those wings and settled down on earth on account of their huge weight, thus conducing to the destruction of created beings. Nay, by this was rent asunder the demon Vritra, the vigorous austerity personified, of Tvashta Prajapati, and others too, who were endowed with extraordinary strength and whose skin could not even be scratched with all the missiles. When hurled by me at this puny Asura, the same thunderbolt has been rendered ineffectual. A mere staff, I shall no more handle it, though embodying the spiritual energy of a Brahmana, the sage Dadichi. It is unavailing now. To Shakra, who was thus sorrowing, an incorporeal voice said, "This Asura, Namuchi, can be killed neither with dry nor with wet things, since a boon has been conferred on him by me to the effect that death will surely not come to him through any wet or dry substance. Hence any other contrivance should be thought of by you for the death of this enemy, or Maghava." Hearing that ethereal voice, Indra fully composed his mind and contemplated, and presently he discovered a means in the shape of foam of the sea, which combined both the aforesaid attributes of dryness and wetness, and could not therefore be called exclusively dry or wet. With the sea foam, he severed the head of Namochi, and hosts of sages glorified him and showered flowers in the mighty Indra. Vishvavasu and Paravasu, the chief among the Gandharva musicians, sang songs, the celestial drums sounded, and heavenly dancing girls danced with joy. Similarly, other gods too, headed by Vayu, Agni, and Varuna, destroyed their rivals with volleys of missiles, just as lions would kill deer. Perceiving the extermination of the Danavas, the celestial sage Narada was sent by Brahma the creator to the Devas, o protector of men, and he remonstrated with the Devas in the following words. Narada said, "Amratam has been secured by you by resorting to the arms of Lord Narayana, and all of you have been blessed by the goddess Sri. Cease you now from hostilities." Sri Shuka continued. So he's pleading for them to take mercy upon the defeated Asuras and not continue harming them. Sri Shuka continued, "Accepting the advice of the sage, the Devas gave up their anger as well as the zeal for fighting. And being glorified by their attendants, all returned to heaven. Those who survived in that conflict took, with the concurrence of Narada, the lifeless body of their leader Bali, and made for the western hill. There Ushana, Shukracharya, the guru of the Asuras, restored to life by his secret science of resurrecting the dead, those whose limbs were intact and whose neck was still whole. Bali too had his senses of perception and consciousness restored the moment he was touched by the sage Ushana. Though vanquished in battle, he did not feel sorry, fully conversant as he was with the truth of the world." And thus ends the 11th discourse, forming part of the story relating to the war between the Devas and the Asuras in Book 8 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And we will stop there for today. All right, thank you guys for coming. All right, yeah, I'll see you next time. Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna, thank you so much. Right on the time, but I need to leave and we will catch up.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. All right, see you next time.
Haribol, thank you.
Haribol.